Good morning and welcome back to Trinity's Youthful Conversations. I'm Emily Weinhold, Pastor David's wife, and I'm here today to talk a little bit more about Advent, as it is the fourth week of Advent. So in this time, I'd like to look at and kind of talk about what it means, what the Incarnation means, and what the phrase, the Word became flesh and lived among us. So we're going to kind of look at that today. To talk about this, I want to turn to the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is in the New Testament after Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we're going to start at the very beginning, the very first chapter, and the very first verse. And it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being." We will stop there for just a moment. Who is the Word? Who is the He that these verses are referring to? Well, we said today that we were going to talk about a phrase that comes later in John in chapter 1, verses 14, which says, "And the Word became flesh and lived among us." So, if we know that the Word is He, and that He became flesh and lived among us, then who is it? It's Jesus. Wow, if Jesus is the Word of God, then let's read that passage again, but this time thinking about Jesus. "In the beginning was the Word, Jesus, and the Word, Jesus, was with God, and the Word, Jesus, was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being." So, kind of knowing that that Word is Jesus, let's think about the things that we now know. We know about 5 things. We know that Jesus was in the beginning. We know that Jesus was with God. We know that Jesus is God, that Jesus was with God in the beginning, and that all things were created through Jesus. How many of you before today knew that Jesus wasn't created on Christmas? This is amazing. So if Jesus has been with God from the very beginning, since forever actually, what happened in Bethlehem in the little stable when there was no room in the inn? Well, let's go back to that verse in John 1:14. "And the Word became flesh and lived among us." Jesus became human. He was born of Mary, taking on flesh to live among humanity, God's people and his creation. This is an amazing miracle and mystery, what we in the church call the Incarnation. So, Jesus, God's only begotten Son, becoming human, Jesus comes into our world, becoming incarnate to be the greatest gift in all the world, to be our light and our hope. So, if we go back to the beginning of John, John writes, "What has come into being in him was life. The life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it." Jesus, God's Son, who has been with God forever, became human to live among his people so that he could be the light of the world and cast out all darkness of fear and sin and death. Last time we talked about Advent, I told you that I liked the song, O Come, Emmanuel." And so in that song, we sing about Emmanuel, which is God with us. And so in this last week of Advent, we prepare for Jesus coming among us to be the light of the world. So I hope that that kind of gives you a couple things to think about as we go into the last week of Advent and look toward Christmas. I even think that you might hear that verse in John at the end of the service on Christmas Eve. So I hope you all are doing well. I miss you, and I hope to see you very soon.